If I told you there's one silent habit almost every driver does, every single day, that quietly destroys engines, transmissions, batteries, and sensors, you'd probably think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. This habit doesn't trigger a warning light, it doesn't make noise, and it doesn't break your car overnight. Instead, it shortens your car's life 1 mile at a time, then shows up years later as a $3,000 repair that came out of nowhere. I've seen engines fail at 90,000 miles that should have gone 250,000. I've seen transmissions die early, batteries collapse in half their expected lifespan, and owners blame bad design, when the real cause was something they did every day without thinking. Today, I'm going to break down the silent habit that's destroying your car, why modern vehicles are especially vulnerable, and the exact changes that can add years of life back to your vehicle. Stay until the very end, because the last point explains why even well-maintained cars still fail early, and most people never connect the dots. What is the silent habit? Let's define it clearly. The silent habit is short trip driving combined with incomplete warm-up. In simple terms, starting the car, driving a few minutes, shutting it off before everything reaches operating temperature. Most people do this daily, to work, to the store, to school drop-offs. And modern cars hate it. This is an opinion. It's physics, chemistry, and mechanical reality. Why modern cars are more vulnerable than older cars. Older cars tolerated abuse better. Modern cars are either more efficient, more tightly engineered, more dependent on sensors and software. That efficiency comes with trade-offs. Today's engines use tight bearing clearances, thin, fast-flowing oil, turbochargers, direct injection, aggressive emissions systems. All of those require stable operating conditions. Short trips never allow that stability to happen. What actually happens inside your engine on short trips? This is where most drivers are shocked. When you start your engine cold, oil is thick, clearances are tight, fuel mixtures are richer, condensation forms inside the crankcase. On a short trip, oil never fully warms, moisture never evaporates, fuel dilution builds acid forms inside the oil. That contamination doesn't disappear when you shut the engine off. It stays there, day after day. Oil analysis labs consistently show that short-trip vehicles have far higher fuel dilution and moisture contamination, even when oil is changed on time. Why this quietly kills engines. Here's the chain reaction most people never see. Moisture stays trapped in the oil-fuel dilution thins. The oil film strength drops, bearings wear faster, timing components stretch, oil consumption increases. By the time symptoms appear, the damage is already done. This is why two identical cars can have the same mileage, the same oil change history, yet one engine fails years earlier than the other. It's not just the engine. This gets worse. Short trips don't just affect engines, they quietly damage. Batteries cold, starts drain batteries. Short trips never recharge them fully. Batteries sulfate internally. This is why city-driven cars eat batteries every 2 to 3 years. Exhaust systems. Moisture builds in the exhaust. Condensation never burns off. Rust forms from the inside out. Catalytic converters, rich cold start mixtures, dump fuel, unburned fuel, overheats catalysts, premature failure follows. Sensors, O2 sensors get contaminated, fuel trims drift, check engine lights appear later, and again, all of this happens silently. Why drivers never connect the dots. Here's the psychological trap. Short trips feel gentle, you're not. Speeding, towing, racing, revving aggressively, so it feels like you're being kind to the car. In reality, you're never letting it reach the conditions it was designed for. That mismatch is what causes early failure. The myth that makes this worse. You've probably heard this advice. Gentle driving makes cars last longer. That's only half true. Gentle driving after full warm-up is healthy. Gentle driving without ever warming the car fully is destructive. Engines need heat-stable combustion, proper oil temperature. Without those, deposits build, oil degrades, and wear accelerates. Quick reality check. Comment section moment. Be honest for a second. How many of your weekly drives are under 10 minutes? Most of them, about half, almost none. Comment below. Your answer says a lot about your car's future, even if it runs perfectly today. Why oil changes alone don't fix this. This is important. Many drivers think, I change my oil on time, so I'm safe. Oil changes help, but they don't undo short trip damage. Why? Moisture forms immediately. Fuel dilution happens every cold start. Oil degradation is constant. Frequent oil changes reduce damage. They don't eliminate it. That's why manufacturers classify short trip driving as severe service. And most drivers don't realize they fall into that category. What manufacturers quietly assume you'll do. Here's what OEM engineers assume when designing engines. The car will regularly reach full operating temperature. Oil will occasionally get hot enough to evaporate moisture. Exhaust systems will dry out. Batteries will recharge fully. When real-world driving doesn't match those assumptions, longevity drops. Not because the car is bad, but because it's being used outside its ideal operating pattern. The temperature your engine must reach. This is the line most cars never cross. Here's a detail most drivers, and even many mechanics, misunderstand. Your engine is not fully warmed up when the temperature gauge reaches the middle. The blue cold light turns off. The heater starts blowing warm air. Those are coolant indicators, not oil indicators. The critical number most drivers never hit for internal damage to stop accumulating, engine oil must reach roughly 212 degm, 100 degrees. Why that number matters. Moisture trapped in oil evaporates at this temperature. Fuel dilution begins to burn off. Acid formation slows dramatically. On short trips, oil temperature often stays 140, 170 degrees. Even when coolant looks normal, that means damage continues silently. How long it really takes to warm an engine properly. This part surprises people. In moderate weather, coolant may warm in 3 to 5 minutes. Oil often needs 15 to 25 minutes of driving to fully stabilize. In cold weather, it can take 30 minutes or more. Idling does not count. Idling warms coolant slowly, but barely warms oil, increases fuel dilution, worsens carbon buildup. That's why warming up in the driveway actually makes this habit worse. Why remote start can quietly accelerate damage. This one makes people uncomfortable. Remote start feels protective, but in many cases, it does the opposite. When a car idles cold, runs rich, never gets driven long enough afterward, you get maximum fuel dilution, minimal oil heating, moisture buildup. Remote start is fine if the car is driven long enough afterward. Remote start is harmful if the trip is short. This is why some manufacturers now limit idle time automatically. They know the damage profile. The driving pattern that neutralizes short trip damage. Here's the good news. You don't need to stop making short trips. You just need to counterbalance them. Experienced mechanics and engineers recommend this simple rule. For every week of short trips, give your car one full heat cycle. What does that mean? 20-30 minutes of continuous driving after full warm-up at steady speeds with light to moderate engine load, not aggressive, not redline, not stop and go. This allows oil to reach full temperature, moisture to evaporate, fuel dilution to burn off, exhaust systems to dry. This single habit dramatically extends engine life. Why highway driving works better than hard driving. There's a myth that engines need to be driven hard. That's misleading. What engines really need is consistency. Steady-state driving stabilizes combustion, maintains oil pressure, keeps temperatures even. Random aggressive bursts, shock components, loosen deposits unevenly, increase wear if oil isn't hot, smooth, sustained driving wins every time. How? This habit accelerates carbon buildup. Short trips are carbon factories. Here's why. Cold starts run rich, fuel sticks to cylinder walls, combustion temperatures stay low, deposits never burn off. Over time, intake valves foul, especially on GDI engines. Piston rings stick, throttle response degrades, then people chase. Carbon cleaning services, chemical fixes, expensive repairs, when the real problem was never letting the engine live in its proper temperature zone. Why oil life monitors can't fully protect you. Oil life monitors are smart, but limited. They calculate engine load, RPM temperature trends. They do not directly measure moisture accumulation, fuel dilution levels. That's why two cars with identical oil life percentages can have very different oil conditions. Short trip cars degrade oil chemically, not just mechanically. The hidden transmission damage no one talks about. This habit doesn't stop at the engine. Automatic transmissions also suffer. On short trips, fluid never warms fully, moisture stays trapped, shift solenoids operate in thick fluid, clutches wear faster. That's why city-driven vehicles often experience early harsh shifts, torquey converter shudder, premature transmission failures. Again, silently. Quick check-in, comment trigger. Think about your driving honestly. When was the last time your car was driven? 20 minutes or longer without stopping? At steady speed. This week. This month, I honestly don't remember. Comment below. Most people are surprised by their own answer. Why low mileage cars sometimes fail early? This is one of the biggest misconceptions in car buying. Low mileage does not always mean low wear. A car with 40,000 miles. All short trips can be mechanically worse than a car with 90,000 miles. Regular highway use mileage tells you how far a car went. It doesn't tell you how it lived. How to adjust maintenance if you do short trips. This changes everything. If short trips are unavoidable, and for most people they are, the solution is not to panic. The solution is to change how you maintain the car, not just how you drive it. Manufacturers quietly classify frequent short trip driving as severe service. That label matters. What severe service really means? It doesn't mean abuse, it means the car rarely reaches full operating temperature, accumulates moisture and fuel dilution, experiences more cold starts than average. Under severe service, maintenance intervals must change. If you don't adjust, damage compounds quietly. The oil change mistake that makes short trips much worse. This is one of the biggest killers, and almost no one talks about it. Drivers who do short trips often follow the longest oil change interval, trust the oil life monitor blindly, stretch oil changes because miles are low. That's backwards. Short trip driving contaminates oil faster, not slower. Fuel dilution and moisture thin the oil, reduce film strength, accelerate bearing wear. That's why experienced mechanics recommend shorter oil intervals for short trip cars, even if mileage is low. Not because oil is worn out, but because it's chemically compromised. Why turbocharged and hybrid cars are even more sensitive. Modern powertrains amplify this habit's damage. Turbocharged engines. Turbos rely on clean, hot oil, stable lubrication, proper heat cycles. Short trips mean oil never stabilizes, moisture attacks turbo bearings, carbon forms in oil feed lines. That's why many turbo failures trace back to cold starts, short drives, extended oil intervals. Hybrid vehicles. Hybrids seem immune, but they aren't, because the engine runs intermittently. Heat cycles are shorter, oil warms even less consistently. Hybrids doing short trips often have extremely low mileage, surprisingly degraded oil. This is why some manufacturers specify time-based oil changes, not mileage-based ones, for hybrids. Can you reverse damage already happening? This is the question everyone asks. The honest answer is partially. You can't undo mechanical wear already done, but you can. stop moisture accumulation, reduce further fuel dilution, stabilize combustion, slow carbon formation dramatically. How? By restoring full heat cycles regularly. That single change improves oil chemistry, dries internal components, reduces deposit formation. Engines don't need perfection, they need consistency. The reset drive that engineers actually recommend. Here's a habit longtime mechanics quietly practice. Once every week or two, drive 20 to 30 minutes continuously after full warm-up at steady speed with light to moderate engine load. No racing, no red line, no stop and go. This allows oil to reach proper temperature, evaporates moisture, normalizes fuel trims, calms emission systems. It's the closest thing to a reset your car has. Why? This habit explains so many mysterious failures. Think about how many failures people describe as random: engine sludge, timing chain stretch, premature turbo failure battery that won't last, exhaust rust from the inside. These aren't random. They're patterns. Patterns created by repeated incomplete heat cycles. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The mindset shift that makes cars last 200,000 miles. This is the final lesson. Long-lasting cars aren't owned by people who never make short trips. Drive perfectly every time, baby. The car endlessly. They're owned by people who understand operating conditions, balance bad habits with good ones, maintain based on reality, not mileage alone. They don't panic over every short drive. They counteract it intentionally. That's the difference. Final reality check. The silent habit isn't dramatic, it isn't exciting, and it doesn't break cars overnight. That's why it's so dangerous. Every cold start without a full warm-up is a small withdrawal from your car's lifespan. You don't notice it today. You pay for it years later. But once you understand it, you can change the outcome. Be honest. Which one describes your driving best? Mostly short trips, a mix of short and long trips, regular long drives. Comment below. Your answer might explain why your last car lasted as long, or as short, as it did. If this series changed how you think about driving and maintenance, share it with someone who thinks low mileage always means healthy car.